Folks, you can still write a question now, hand it to the people with the boxes. You can write another one in 5 or 10 minutes if you think of it.
Okay, this is a question for Larry. There seem to be two parts. Do any of the landfills accept cuttings from Pennsylvania where horizontal fracking is taking place? In parentheses, drilling new pads can go through affected briny strata from other pads. And secondly, what is done with the leachate?
So the answer to the first question is yes. Obviously, the Marcellus drill cuttings that we're taking are from Pennsylvania because there is no horizontal drilling in New York. The second question, I didn't get the second part of the first part of the question.
What is done with the leachate?
The leachate is taken to local solid waste treatment plants or sewer authorities. So Chemung County goes to the Chemung County wastewater treatment plant, and very similar for the other facilities. So the estimates are, that was pretty good, 20 to 5 million gallons. We've never generated 20 million gallons at Chemung. The highest was ever 12, and that's when we took over, and it's kind of gone down since. So we do a better job of covering up the landfill to reduce the volume. And to address, I'm sure, a question that's going to come up about a leachate, our sampling is from the leachate lagoon. It has nothing to do with stormwater. There is no stormwater that goes into the leachate lagoon.
Okay.
Gary, if you want to speak, you can.
I would just say that the leachate lagoon is an open pond. So, you know, when it snows and it rains, it goes in the pond. That's dilution.
Okay, the next question. Are drill cuttings used as daily cover? And then in parentheses, BUD question mark, which I believe stands for beneficial use determination. When you put things on the roads to either melt the ice in the winter or keep the dust down in the summer. The question is, are drill cuttings used as daily cover, BUD? Please elaborate on potential effects of being closer to the surface and not covered.
So at Chemung County landfill, they are not used as an alternate daily cover. And you're right, BUD is a BUD, or beneficial use determination. And generally, if we have an industrial waste like foundry sand from Kennedy Valve is approved as a daily cover, there's a number of those industrial waste I talked about that are suitable for daily cover. Drill cuttings at Chemung are not, but at our Hyland facility they are. There's no risk more than, as I pointed out, the soil at the facility. Radium doesn't just exist in Marcellus shale. Radium exists all around us all the time. Fire bricks, sandblast media, countertops, you know, they have anything that has ceramics or a high mineral content is going to have some uranium and radium in it. So even the vertical drill cuttings have some radium. It is not as much as Marcellus. They in fact use a radiation detector when they're looking for Marcellus. They do see a increase, and that's how they know they're in the Marcellus. So there's no hiding from that, and it is not 20 times background. If it were 20 times background, then our detectors set at 5 times background would go off every load. So the truth is that anybody is welcome to come out to the landfill, watch a truck go across and through the radiation detectors, and in fact, those are the directions for the radiation detectors don't have the truck stop, they have them roll slowly. So that's what we follow.
Well, the drill cuttings have been measured at, Larry's slide showed that the background soils at the Chemung Landfill, and the area generally are 0.9 picocuries per gram. And Marcellus shale drill cuttings have been measured at 20 picocuries per gram. You can look at the DEC's proposed draft supplemental environmental impact for fracking, which is the latest version is 2011. It's on the DEC's website. Look at Appendix 13. Appendix 13 is very brief. It's just a bunch of tables. It's based on an analysis of the liquid that came from 5 wells that were drilled vertically into the Marcellus shale. And it's an analysis of the liquid that came from the shale formation, not from any of the portions of the soil above. And that's the basis for my contention. It's simply, I'm using DEC's numbers. They found that the liquid, the brine that surrounds the shale, that comes up with the drill cuttings and that makes the drill cuttings wet, is 15,000 times higher than background. So, we're talking about drill cuttings, but we're not talking about drill cuttings. We're talking about drill cuttings and liquid. There are no dry drill cuttings that go to the Chemung County landfill.
Okay, so Gary, I guess this question is for you. It concerns alpha rays. The question is, if alpha rays can't pass through the skin, then what is the harm?
It's a good question. You can hold radium in your hand and it won't hurt you. If you breathe dust or dirt that's been contaminated with radium, it will hurt you. If you eat fish that have radium in it, that will hurt you. If you drink water that has radium in it, that will hurt you.
So I would just point out that Gary agrees with me that the drill cuttings come in wet, so there's not a lot of dust coming off of drill cuttings. There is other things emit alpha particles. Potassium is one of those things that emits alpha particles, and we take potassium as a supplement, or it's in a banana. A banana is radioactive. I don't know if people knew that, but it is the danger of ingestion more than it is being near it that is the concern. I would also point out that in our study, that modeling that we did for the landfill, we included a model called RESRAD. RESRAD is a worker protection study, and that is basically where those 2 best management practices came from, was from a worker protection standpoint, just as a best management practice.
Larry, this is for you, and the first part of the question is, I would like to know why Casella has not delivered on its promises specifically, and then it lists 4 of them. Maybe I'll just mention one at a time so you can not have to remember them all. The first promise that the author thinks Casella has not delivered on is the construction of a hydroponic greenhouse.
The construction of the hydroponic greenhouse was contingent at the, when we signed the OML, that was contingent on actually getting this expansion that we're talking about today and the construction of the power plant.
And the promise to the startup of gas to electric generators at Milton Street.
Again, and this is a good point to discuss, is we, as Casella, started operating this facility in 2005. In 2005, nobody here knew about Marcellus shale or drilling. In our agreement with the county in 2005, we laid out the parameters for the expansion that we're talking about today. The expansion today is not because of Marcellus shale. In fact, the oil and gas industry have ramped up. They've oversupplied the supply that's required, and now they've ramped down. There are fewer wells and fewer drill cuttings today than there were 2 or 3 years ago. That will continue to be. That's the way the oil and gas industry works. So this expansion has little to do with the oil and gas waste. It is a material that we can take, and it is something that we feel that we can manage properly. And to the extent that it exists, then we are going to continue managing it with the instruction from the experts, the DEC and the folks like we hired for this study. So all of that, this expansion keyed probably all of those, even the, I don't know what the next two are, but in that original OML, this expansion and this tonnage volume increase were contemplated from day one.
The third promise they feel has not been addressed or answered is the development of a community education center.
Same answer.
Same answer. And the fourth, the promise to not expand the footprint of the landfill.
So there are some definitional issues, and we have met our commitment from that perspective. This expansion meets that commitment. When the OML was drafted, the language in the OML says we will not go off of the current landfill property, and this expansion does not go off the current landfill property. It is a footprint expansion because there's going to be a few more cells, but it is on the original landfill property. Even though the county has bought property next to it, we've bought some property further out. The landfill remains on the current the original landfill property.
Okay, so this is a composite question about safety. First of all, how can you prove that the sludge and drill cuttings and general waste is not harmful to the environment in any way? How can you guarantee that these materials can be transported without losing some? How do you safely dispose, I'm not sure of what? Why does Casella claim there is no danger from radium-226? And this was asked by another person as well. Why isn't Pennsylvania waste kept in Pennsylvania?
So I don't even know if I remember the first one.
The first one is, how can you prove the sludge and drill cuttings and general waste is not harmful to the environment?
So we did what I explained in my presentation. Not only have we had analytical reports from different pads, but we went out and did these studies. So that's what the proof is we hired experts and we went out and we did studies. As a precaution, we installed these radiation detectors. So on a daily basis, every truck runs through those radiation detectors, and we rely on that as well as anything. If you come out to the landfill, you can come into the scale house, you can watch a truck when it goes across the detector, the reading actually goes down. It doesn't go up, it goes down, because the level is so low that the truck and the mass of the material will reduce the level at the meters. So there's nothing hiding in it. There's nothing. We've calibrated our detectors. We put a source of radiation inside of a truck to make sure that the truck wasn't going to shield the detectors. And it's very hard to shield gamma rays. There was two or three more? Or?
Maybe we should.
The main one was, why doesn't the Pennsylvania waste stay in Pennsylvania?
Okay, great question. So this activity is a regional activity. And when Pennsylvania landfills, it is a misnomer to think that Pennsylvania landfills are not taking drill cuttings. They can only take so much and still have room for the solid waste that they have. What they can't take is what we take. So when there is a concentration of activity like there is just south of here and a little bit east, then they continue to take them to Pennsylvania landfills, but there is an overabundance of drill cuttings that need to be disposed of. And we talked about, if it was not harmful at all, then why would we put it in a landfill? Well, we don't want trash scattered around. That's why we built landfills. We built landfills for a purpose. So it's not a hazardous waste landfill. We're not taking hazardous waste. It's just drill cuttings that doesn't make sense to spread all over. In other states, they use drill cuttings they land apply them to farm fields and they grow crops out of them. Not necessarily Marcellus, but other drill cuttings. So it makes sense that in the Northeast that we would want to manage those drill cuttings to a higher level than just leaving them in the pit at the site or spreading them on a farm field. It makes sense to put them in a landfill.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, you may both speak.
I think it's important to be clear about what we mean by Marcellus shale drill cuttings. The Marcellus shale formation is detected by the drillers with a Geiger counter because the formations above it and below it are not as radioactive. So the natural radioactivity in the Marcellus shale, which I say is 20 times more radioactive than anything above it or below it, including what's on the surface, that's the starting point for understanding what we're dealing with. And the liquid that surrounds the shale is much more radioactive than that because it has taken one radionuclide, or maybe two, radium-226 and 228, both of which are water soluble, as it has leached that out of the rock. So the drill cuttings going to the landfill are, much more radioactive than the background. And as I indicated, based on an incident report I have, and I would be happy to share with anybody who wants to email me, I will send you my scanned copy of it, from the Allied Waste Landfill, reported that the radioactivity from radium-226 was 205 picocuries per gram in a load that was rejected because it set off their alarm. They pulled the guy over and they scanned the load from the top down. And this has happened in, as I say, in Pennsylvania 1,000 times in the last 2.5 years. Why hasn't it happened at Chemung? I mean, it would be one thing if they took the drill cuttings in and they said, we're not going to take them in if they're excessively radioactive, and we're going to have a program in place that stops that from happening. Then you would have expected some alarms in the last few years. But you don't get that. In addition, I talked about the results of their own testing of their own leachate, and it is becoming progressively more radioactive. The 2013 results are higher than the 2012 results. They've done this testing 4 times now. They're supposed to test until June of this year, and then they're going to go to annual testing. Under the permit, they're allowed to then stop testing semi-annually and to test annually, and to stop testing the leachate from the landfill and just test the lagoons, unless there's some reason to continue testing. Well, I think the results are in. The radium concentration in the leachate is increasing over time, just as we said in 2010. We said that that would happen, and it has happened.
This person has 3 different questions. I'm just going to ask the first one because that's in fairness to the others whose questions are waiting to be answered. Mr. Shilling, what is the potential, well, this can go to either of you. What is the potential for the entry of the water collected or any runoff into the groundwater system? What is the potential for the water getting into the groundwater system?
You want me to go first? All right. The potential is very, very remote. In fact, the new liner designs that have been in place since the late 80s, early 90s, the double composite liner system that we follow in New York, is actually the federal hazardous waste liner system. So it's a double composite liner system. It is, for all practical terms, a bathtub inside of a bathtub. And as Gary alluded to earlier, that we we pay attention to the zone in between the 2 liners, and we monitor and test that water. So just as often as we test quarterly our groundwater wells, our leachate samples, we test the secondary water to see if it has been contaminated or has some reason for us to believe that the landfill is leaking. There is not one landfill in New York that has the current liner system design that has ever leaked, and we've been doing this since 1990. So out of all of that testing, none of those landfills have ever impacted groundwater.
Gary, do you want to say something? Potential for groundwater contamination.
Sure. The double liner system that the federal government imposes on landfills, the EPA said in the late 90s that all landfill liners will leak. All landfills will leak, notwithstanding the fact that they have these double liners. I mean, just think about it. Landfills are here forever. Not since 1990 have you had a leak. Well, that doesn't tell you anything about what's going to happen in the next 100 years or the next 1,000 years. I mean, someday somebody's going to come along 1,000 years from now or more and want to build something on top of this landfill at the Chemung County landfill site. And there's going to be radium there that has a half-life of 1,620 years. So a lot of that radium will still be there. The radium they're putting into it now will remain there for a long time. So to say that you haven't had a landfill leak in New York since 1990 is not very meaningful.
Is there chances for rebuttal?
Be my guest.
All right.
Oh, you should let him. Go ahead.
So if I were to say that there are the geotechnical institutes do the same thing. They test liners. Their prediction for these liners to last in a landfill environment is now exceeding 1,000 years. So landfills are an organism, basically an anaerobic digester. And the inorganic material will be in the landfill for a long time. But it quits producing gas after 30 years. The leachate, after it's capped, will go to zero. Eventually, the landfill will be a plastic bag, a Ziploc baggie of material with no leaks. So I would just say that there are studies that indicate that these liners are going to last 1,000 years.
Okay, so I've got 2 or 3 questions here that concern the leachate. So I'll try and combine them into one. Yes, the liners are secure if that's what your studies show. But what about the leachate? As I understood it, that is being drawn off. What guarantee is that won't get into the water supply?
So the leachate is drawn off the bottom of the landfill, and it is taken today to wastewater treatment plants. We test it. It is well below anything that would cause a concern for the wastewater treatment plant, and that's why we do what we do. Is if it ever had an issue, whether it was radium or any other issue, that it was not acceptable for a wastewater treatment plant to accept, then we would find an alternative for that. In fact, we have a plant built in Pennsylvania that takes oil and gas water and distills the water out of it, and where we can actually discharge it with nothing in it. It's distilled water. We also use that plant in Pennsylvania to treat our leachate. It does a very effective job of pulling the clean water out of the leachate, reducing the volume by 96-97%. So there are alternatives. And to say that a wastewater treatment plant doesn't have an ability to remove radium is just wrong. And most of the radium is a solid, and that's what wastewater treatment plants do. They drop solids. So it depends on whether it is dissolved or suspended. Wastewater treatment plants do remove suspended solids. And the radium, if there were any, would be in both. I would also ask each of you to look up your water supply vendor and check how much radium is in your water today.
There was also concern in one of these questions, not so much about the radium, but about the chemicals that are mixed in with the water that comes up with the drill cuttings. How are they? So it says here, do you honestly believe the chemicals mixed in with the cuttings will not leach into the water supply? So what are the guarantees that water won't be chemically contaminated water won't be spilt at some stage, or is there any danger with the extraction process that it doesn't get into the tanks to go to the water treatment plant? And does the water treatment plant take the chemicals out?
So it depends. Chemicals are a very broad range. I mean, water is actually a chemical. So, but the chemicals that that's why leachate is leachate, and that's why landfills are landfills. It is the best way we have to manage the waste that we generate today. And it is for that reason that we test our leachate on a constant basis. It is for that reason that we ran the second phase of the study, was to estimate what the degradation or increase in chemical compounds would be to the leachate from the oil and gas industry. So that's what we do. We manage those issues. Those chemicals the chemicals associated with drill cuttings are not very much. There is probably more chemicals in the aerosol can you threw in your trash last week. So the chemicals that we have to watch aren't just from drill cuttings, it's from all the waste, and that's why we do the testing that we do.
I have 3 questions here that have
Do you wanna-
already been, Gary, excuse me.
The EPA has also said that because of the hazardous waste in your garbage that you throw away and that goes into the landfill, the leachate from a municipal solid waste landfill has the same chemical profile as the leachate from a hazardous waste landfill. So leachate from a landfill is bad stuff. And it goes to your water treatment plant, and you have to expect that your water treatment plant can treat it. But I can tell you that in New York, there is not a single municipal water treatment plant that is licensed to remove or handle radioactivity. So I know for a fact that the Elmira water treatment plants that take Chemung County landfills leachate do not take any radioactivity out of the leachate. I've already told you that based on their own reports submitted to the DEC, the concentration of radium-226 plus radium-228 has already reached 14.15 picocuries per liter. Now, the addition of radium-226 and 228 is important because it's illegal to discharge radium measured as the addition of radium-226 and 228 in a concentration more than 3 picocuries per liter into the Chemung River, because it's a Class A water body. It has the highest limitation on what you can put in it. So, and it's also illegal to dilute your wastewater before you take it to the wastewater treatment plant. And now we're getting into a gray area and kind of a legal argument, because there's a question as to whether it's legal to take leachate that measures 14.15 picocuries per liter, run it through a wastewater pond, and then take it to the wastewater treatment plant, which is subject to a limit of 3 picocuries per liter. Is that circumventing the law?
The next question is very specific and short. Larry, this is for you, and it's dealing with something in Wellsburg. I would like to know why Casella is purchasing land along the railroad on the south side of the Chemung River, 2 miles east of Wellsburg.
So, great question. If you don't know, as part of our operation and management agreement, we implemented a property protection plan that extends 3/4 of a mile from the landfill. That property protection plan obligates us, for those that signed up, to guarantee that their value of their property would not be reduced, or would be a fair market value. So that property that we purchased was part of and subject to that property protection plan.
Okay, so this is a bit of a follow-up on the leachate. How many leachate truckloads are presently being shipped from the Hyland Angelica dump to the Wellsville Village wastewater treatment plant on a daily basis?
So presently there are very few because it is cold outside and water doesn't move when it's cold. So, but we do, I think, about 8 million gallons a year from the Hyland facility, some of which goes to the Wellsville plant and some goes to Steuben County, their leachate pretreatment system at the landfill.
Three of these questions that I have to do with the chemicals and the treatment plants, which you've both already addressed, so I'm not going to ask those. Here's one. How is the leachate tested for heavy metals? And if it isn't, why isn't it? And everyone in the room may not know what heavy metals are. They include arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, mercury, lead, and a bunch of others. So the question is the leachate tested for heavy metals? And if not, why not?
They are,
They are?
yes.
Okay, I'm going to tie in another question. Throughout the evening when you say, Mr. Shilling, that we tested, or you just said they are tested, does that mean Casella does it? Does a gas company do it? Does an independent tester do it?
So certainly no gas company comes on our property and tests our water. Casella hires licensed professionals. We do not grab our own samples. We have consultants, and it's sent to certified labs for testing, New York certified labs. While they're getting organized, I will add one more thing, and that is at times the DEC comes out and grabs split samples of our testing.
Okay. Does the potential for revenue to the county and to Casella, how does the potential for revenue to the county and Casella compare to the risk of liability to Casella and the county?
I guess the best way to answer that is, through my presentation, I described the fact that Casella is responsible. So we post the closure bond, we post a post-closure bond. We are liable for anything that happens at that facility. And at the other two facilities that are sort of the topic of the discussion tonight, we own those facilities, so we are certainly liable for those. So having done the studies and understand how to best manage this material, I think that is a very we understand that there's not a huge liability, more so than any other waste we might manage. And from our perspective, the revenue offsets the liability.
Why don't you send the leachate to the plant in Pennsylvania for distillation? And why don't you take the wet sludge there instead of here?
You'll have to repeat the second one when we get there. But the leachate from here, the Pennsylvania facility is 4 or 5 hours. So that's not a very environmentally friendly thing to do, is put anything on a truck and drive it burning diesel fuel 4 or 5 hours for every 7,000 gallons. So it's really not practical to send it to Pennsylvania. Our Hyland facility is still 2 hours from that facility, and it is not very practical to send that leachate there as well. We may, in fact, down the road, as these technologies become more available, treat our leachate in a similar fashion at all of our facilities, but that will come with time, and we will continue to investigate those opportunities. So the second piece?
Much the same. Why doesn't the sludge go to the Pennsylvania facility?
Yeah, so if you're talking about the sludge from the oil and gas waste, Chemung County doesn't take sludge from oil and gas waste from a water treatment plant. So we take drill cuttings and drill cuttings only. Before the last permit, we did take one cleanup of contaminated soil from where they had spilled frack water on the soil, and they cleaned up the dirt, so it wasn't liquid, it was dirt contaminated with liquid. And but since the last permit, we committed to only taking the drill cuttings. So the sludges from the wastewater treatment plants that treat oil and gas waste are not being delivered to Chemung County. Chemung County does take sludges, however, and we take sludges from the wastewater treatment plant and several wastewater treatment plants around the area. So,
This question again is for you, Larry. Could you tell us about Casella's policy on socially responsible business? That is, does there come a point when you put people ahead of profits?
we absolutely do. Casella prides itself. We were the only vertically integrated solid waste company that took part of the EPA Climate Leaders Program. And from 2005 to 2012, we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. We are the company that started single stream recycling. Single stream recycling increases the amount of material diverted from disposal. We started it in New York, the first plant. We started it in Vermont with the first plant. We started it in Massachusetts with the first plant. And we're getting ready to build the first plant in Maine. We are the largest organics processing company in the Northeast. We manage about 500,000 tons of organics back through compost, through anaerobic digestion, and land application on farm fields. So we are very responsible. That's what I love about this company, is it is about being responsible and managing material in the best way.
Can I weigh in on that? Landfills are the second largest source of methane emissions in the world, second to cows. The largest source of man-made methane. Cows are considered man-made methane because we wouldn't have cows in nature without people. But, so if you're going to reduce your greenhouse gases from your truck emissions, that just pales in, the amount of gas you're releasing from your landfills pales in comparison to that.
That included our landfills.
Well, it's impossible to reduce the methane that comes out of the landfill. The landfill gas collection system captures 75% of the gas. 25% of it escapes uncollected and uncontrolled. The combustion device that the gas is run through does reduce the methane by turning it into carbon dioxide.